At some point in your life, you've probably heard the phrase Columbus discovered America. And while that statement is patently untrue, why do we insist on rejecting the findings of archaeologists about America's first people? Where do we find the stories about America's first people? Native American tradition offers a variety of origin stories, telling of the creation and migration of America's first people, like the Salian people's account of Bald Eagle forming the first man and the first woman, or the Lenape story about Sky Woman creating Turtle Island, or Mother Mound, who discovered and created the Choctaw. These stories are vital parts of Native American history and belief system. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Overshadowed, a Native American history channel. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most fascinating and hotly debated discoveries in North American archaeology, the ancient human footprints found at White Sands National Park in New Mexico. These remarkable footprints in the mud have the potential to rewrite the history of how and when humans first arrived on the North American continent. My name is Joe, and I have a master's degree in American Studies with an emphasis in history and Native American history. The footprints found at White Sands National Park in New Mexico, as well as other discoveries across the continent, have been met with skepticism by archaeologists who hold on tightly to the established timeline that they created of indigenous Americans. Before the discovery of spear points in Clovis and Folsom, New Mexico in the 1930s, it was generally accepted by leading scholars that humans had only been in North America for roughly 3,000 years. These dates were chosen in large part due to the belief system regarding race and indigeneity that had come out of the 18th and 19th centuries. While it was accepted that indigenous Americans were Homo sapiens, as early as the 18th century, they were seen as representatives of humanity that Europeans had long since evolved from. Indigenous people were the basis, for example, of John Locke's idea of man in the state of nature. Some even went so far as to claim that indigenous peoples were the lost tribes of Israel. For many, the stories of the Bible are historical fact, and as such, some believe that God only created the earth roughly 6,000 to 4,000 BCE. As a result, indigenous peoples could not have arrived in America prior to the creation of the world. These theories were set aside, though, after radiocarbon dating showed the spear points found in Clovis to be 13,000 years old. For decades since, the prevailing scientific theory known as Clovis first model held that the first human migration into the Americas occurred somewhere around 13,000 years ago. This was based upon the widespread discovery of the distinctive fluted spear points called Clovis points, first found near Clovis, New Mexico, and dated to this period. Clovis points were found across North America and even into South America, suggesting a rapid dispersal. However, the Clovis first theory often tied arrival to the opening of an ice-free corridor that developed as glaciers receded in North America around 13,000 years ago. This corridor was thought to have provided a land passage from Beringia, the land bridge connecting Asia and North America across the Bering Strait, southward into the rest of the continent. However, the Clovis first model and the sole reliance on the ice-free corridor theory began to face challenges starting in the late 20th century. A key discovery was the Monteverde site in Chile, which yielded well-preserved evidence of human occupation dating back to 14,800 years ago, significantly older than the Clovis barrier of 13,000 years. The dates from Monteverde were independently confirmed, making it undeniable that humans were in South America well before the accepted date for the opening of the ice-free corridor. That leads us to the story of the footprints found on the banks of an ancient lake bed in White Sands, New Mexico. Local resident George Ellis Wright first reported fossil tracks in Tularosa Basin in 1931, initially believing them to belong to giant humans. Later in 1981, Peter Eidenbach of New Mexico State University researched other fossil footprints found along the lake bed's northern shore, concluding they were likely made by Pleistocene mammals like mammoths and camels. However, it wasn't until the early 2000s that interest truly reignited. By 2011, staff and volunteers at White Sands began to record fossilized footprints within the national park. What started as dozens quickly grew to hundreds, then to thousands, leading researchers to dub it the Late Pleistocene Mega Track Site by 2014. These prints are incredibly delicate and short-lived once exposed, but they are also remarkably well preserved in the gypsum-rich lake bed sediments. When research published in Science in September 2021 initially claimed that the footprints dated back between 23 and 21,000 years ago, it sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. This was because they had the widely accepted scientific consensus for humanity's first arrivals placed the earliest known dates between 14,000 and 16,000 years ago. If the original claims were correct, it would necessitate a reevaluation of current chronological models in fields from paleogenetics to regional geochronology. David Rode, a paleoecologist at DRI and co-author of a later study, noted it really does throw a lot of what we think we know into question. While there was skepticism over the dating of the footprints, 3 independent studies have shown a remarkably high level of similarity in their dating. I don't presume to be or know much about the dating systems, as I'm a historian and not an archaeologist, but I'll do my best to describe them for you. That said, each test was conducted on a different aspect: seeds, terrestrial pollen, and an optical luminescence of the sand. The initial dating relied on radiocarbon dating of tiny seeds from aquatic plants found within the footprint layers. This method measures the decay of carbon-14 isotopes to determine the approximate age of 21,000 to 23,000 years ago. However, the test was questioned because the seeds in question, Rupia cerosa, can take on groundwater, which can throw off the date by thousands of years. A second test was conducted to take this into account and dated the seeds 15,000 years, much closer to the 13,000-year Clovis barrier. In 2023, Kathleen Springer and Jeffrey Pagati looked to corroborate their previous study using optically stimulated luminescence. This method uses light to determine the age of things and can be dating things much older than what carbon-14 can date. The OSL test was used to measure the energy built up in crystals of quartz within the white sand sediment. While they collected coniferous tree pollen embedded in the footprints and conducted carbon-14 testing. The tree pollen carbon-14 tested corroborated the findings of the initial study, while the OSL found the quartz was approximately 21,000 years old, plus or minus 2,000 years. The most recent test, conducted by Arizona State University, used radiocarbon dating to test the age of terrestrial pollen. Their test came back with dates ranging from 17,000 to 23,000 years. These footprints are among the oldest confirmed evidence of human presence in the Americas to gain large scientific and academic support. More importantly, they mean we have to rethink how long indigenous peoples have been in the Americas and how they got here. But those are conversations for next time. Thank you again for joining me as we uncover the history of Native Americans here on Overshadowed. I will see you all next time.